The casino industry in Connecticut has been struggling, so leaders at both Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods say it's best right now to just focus on the success of their current businesses. The Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation and the Mohegan Tribe announcing they are dropping their development plans for the Tribal Winds Casino in East Windsor for now.
I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that they need to reevaluate where things are in the midst of recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. Certainly, East Windsor understands that.
The tribes made a historic decision closing both casinos back in March due to the pandemic, but since reopening in June, they've been operating at 25% capacity. On Monday, Foxwoods announced furloughs of about 100 employees due to the impact of COVID. And with not many people coming through their doors, lawmakers say gambling on another Connecticut casino isn't a safe bet.
This is a disappointing decision, no doubt about that, but it's a very realistic decision. If you look at the situation of the economy right now and the fact that even in the existing casinos, they are not seeing the number of people come in as a part.
Governor Lamont pointing out the state was not involved in the tribe's decision.
Let's face it, bricks and mortar casinos are in some distress right now, just like bricks and mortar retail and even restaurants. The world is moving online, and I think gambling is no exception. But I think we're going to modernize along with the rest of the industry.
On Monday, in an effort to recover financially, Foxwoods announced a partnership with DraftKings, an online sports betting company, even though the state has not enacted legislation that would legalize online sports gambling.
We need to have bills for sports wagering, and that is going to, the sports betting opportunities will give them the financial strength and the state of Connecticut the financial strength. And a combination of this is going to put the entire business back in place.
Casino leaders say this doesn't mean they will no longer consider bringing a casino to East Windsor, but this does mean the project is on hold until they can approach it with financial confidence. In East Windsor, Nia Maldonado, Fox 61 News.